Hated by American leaders. Coveted by British generals. 1812. Britain and the United States are on the verge of war. At stake, control of a continent. The Americans outnumber the British. If Canada is to survive, the British must ally with North American natives. Few will have more influence over this union than the charismatic Shawnee known as Tecumseh.
Every day, the Americans drive us farther and farther west. I see no way to remain at peace. I will travel the land and speak to all our peoples and let them know we need to fight together.
Tecumseh has a dream. He wants to thwart American westward expansion and establish a permanent Indian homeland in what's known as the Old Northwest, stretching west from the Ohio River to the Mississippi and north to the Great Lakes.
Tecumseh's vision was a lofty one. And perhaps that's why his legacy is what it is. He dreamed the impossible dream.
We want to save this land. And if the Americans try to take it, we will fight and die if we must.
Prior to the War of 1812, the native peoples of the area south of the Great Lakes had been conducting a losing battle against American encroachment since the American Revolutionary War.
They take our land, our animals, always pushing us out of our homes. We cannot rest.
Tecumseh realized that without serious action, if the trend continued, the natives would lose all their lands and have no home. Abandonments of the native cause.
Obviously, it was the British colonies who wanted his people's land to begin with, and there was treaties that were negotiated that displaced, the Indians further westward. But now he wanted them as allies.
June 18th, 1812, the Americans declare war. On July 17th, British forces capture Fort Mackinac, a remote American outpost on Lake Huron. The victory is swift, decisive. Not a single man is lost. This bold victory impresses native leaders.
The easy victory by the British really helped the doubters among the native nations to say, yes, we need to fight with Tecumseh and the British.
Meanwhile, Tecumseh and his warriors are winning impressive victories too. August 4th, Brownstown, south of Detroit. Tecumseh and 24 other warriors await an American force 6 times as large. Tecumseh's men attack. They are swift, efficient.
It was a kind of fighting that Europeans and Americans trained in the European tradition had never really kind of witnessed before. We would call it today guerrilla-type war fighting, using the trees, using the foliage as camouflage.
It is a magnificent victory. 19 Americans are killed, 12 are wounded. Tecumseh loses a single warrior. The commander of Upper Canada, General Isaac Brock, hears of the native victory and of Tecumseh.
On the outbreak of war, Brock was one very desperate man, desperate for manpower. Given the Napoleonic conflict, it was clear that many British troops could not be spared for British North America. That meant that he was left with some 1,500 troops with which to defend a very long frontier.
This is the site of Fort Amherstburg, across the river from Detroit. Brock is here with British troops planning the next stages of the war. He agrees to meet with native leaders.
Each native nation can provide so many warriors, perhaps over 1,000. And we need to look at all the different native nations in that manner. 1,000 here, 1,000 here, another 1,000, and that's a lot. And certainly you don't want them fighting against you. So why not have them fighting for you?
At the house of a British official, Brock comes face to face with the Shawnee leader, Tecumseh.
The two coming together, it's like they've met their lost brother. In each of them, they find the equal of another warrior. And warrior meaning at the highest level, and the highest level meaning that you're willing to risk your life. You're willing to die for your cause.
This Brock is a man. We shall fight alongside this one. Our time is now.
To help secure the alliance, Brock makes an extraordinary promise.
Brock actually made a promise to Tecumseh that in return for native participation in the war, he would recover lands lost to the Americans through encroachment.
The British have turned their backs on us before. The Great Spirit shows us this is a different war. We shall fight alongside the Redcoats for our homeland.
August 1812. British Commander Isaac Brock is in a difficult position. The overall British strategy encourages caution. They know that Americans are severely divided about this war and hope that will buy them the time they need to negotiate peace. But the natives want action, and so does Brock. He invites Tecumseh to help him attack the American fort at Detroit.
Tecumseh had to have an inducement to engage in this war because the risks were dire. If he lost, they lost everything. If they won, as he put it, this is our best chance to establish the homeland.
Tecumseh agrees. Together they plan to attack Fort Detroit the very next day.
Well, how are you going to do this? Fort Detroit is a village with a palisade around it and with a fort, and it's on the river too, so how do you do that? Brock, he asked Tecumseh as much as he knew about Detroit, about the palisade, about the fort, and even about the natural environment. It was said that even at one point that Tecumseh very carefully And you can imagine this, taking the piece of a bark and drawing a map of Detroit.
Brock and Tecumseh use a powerful bluff against the American commander, William Hull. They know Hull has overestimated Brock's troops and is terrified of the natives.
Tecumseh magnified his numbers as well by running in and out of the bush repeatedly with his followers. This had two effects. First of all, it magnified his numbers, but secondly, it made Hull more conscious of the fact that there were large numbers of native warriors out there just waiting to get at the defenders.
The British fire a single cannon shot. It plows into the officers' quarters.
Brock sends Hull a message, and he says something to the effect that you have to surrender. I cannot control the Indians if we attack, because the Indians, as you know by their reputation, will pillage and mutilate all of the people, including the women and children.
The natives conducted these, what we would consider barbaric practices of war deliberately as a technique to psychologically undermine the morale of the enemy.
Hull is terrified. The bluff works. Against the wishes of his officers, Hull surrenders. It is a stunning victory.
When General Hull arrived at Detroit on the outbreak of war, he outnumbered the British defenders in the locality by 10 to 1. Upper Canada itself was considered lost by most of the residents and observers at the time. By capturing Detroit, Brock had completely reversed Washington's expectations for a swift and easy victory in Upper Canada.
We have won a great victory for our people and for our friend, the king.
But Brock and Tecumseh have little time to savor the victory. On the 13th of October, the Americans cross the Niagara River and launch an invasion of Queenston Heights. The Americans have the advantage of surprise, but Brock's forces, native and British reinforcements, drive the Americans back across the river. Brock's forces, along with a contingent of Iroquois warriors, undertake a brilliant counterattack and encircle the American forces at Queenston Heights. The British win the battle, but lose a leader. As General Isaac Brock is leading a charge to retake a crucial gun position, a musket ball hits him in the chest, killing Tecumseh's kindred spirit.
Tecumseh felt like he had actually lost a brother. Brothers in war, brothers for a common cause, brothers in respect for each other, and that type of admiration and commitment to each other, doing the same thing and wanting to, even if they had to give their lives. When Isaac Brock being killed in action, Tecumseh now was alone again.
Brock was not like any other white man. He was brave, and his word was good.
With Brock gone, Tecumseh must work with Major General Henry Proctor. Tecumseh soon discovers Proctor is a very different kind of ally.
What Tecumseh thought of Henry Proctor was a commander who was perhaps playing it really safe.
This new redcoat leader is not like Brock, our brother. This one does not seek to win war, only to avoid losing it. We do not know if we can trust him.
The loss of Isaac Brock could not have come at a worse time for Tecumseh.
After the capture of Detroit, Governor Harrison conducted search and destroy raids in Indiana, destroying native villages and particularly their accumulated provisions. By destroying the provisions, you destroy their ability to fight.
We cannot let the Americans take our lands. Will the British fight alongside us or not?
Proctor decides to invade Ohio. Tecumseh is eager to help. They attack Tecumseh's old enemy, William Henry Harrison, at Fort Meigs. April 28, 1813. Fort Meigs is heavily fortified. Tecumseh arrives with 2,800 men. a combination of militia, British regulars, and native warriors. For 2 days, both sides prepare. On May 1st, the siege begins. For 3 days, British forces bombard the fort while natives wait to ambush any arriving American reinforcements. There's no way to breach the defenses, and the Americans refuse to come out to fight.
It stood on commanding ground with a cleared killing zone all around. It was professionally designed by West Point engineers. Fort Meigs was a tough nut, and the British and their native allies simply didn't have the wherewithal to reduce it.
It's hard to fight people who live like groundhogs.
May 5th, American reinforcements arrive at the fort. Tecumseh's warriors attack.
There are many stories about the role of Tecumseh where he actually intervened in a massacre that was in fact in progress.
The savage type of reputation that many warriors gained was from the practice of plundering, rape, mutilation of dead bodies, things like that. That really made Tecumseh sick. It was not at the level that he thought of a warrior.
Tecumseh orders his men to stop.
I've seen war for many seasons now. I've seen blood run like water into the ground. I say this, a true warrior has no need to do such things.
May 9th, Fort Meigs is still not taken after 8 days of attack. Proctor orders his army to retreat.
Tecumseh, of course, viewed the proposal for a British retreat as an act of treachery.
Some of Tecumseh's warriors didn't want to go into Canada because they thought that that was the line of that their homelands were really kind of south of that area. And so you see that kind of, debate, that kind of conversation, around the campfires.
We must fight here in this place. This is our time.
It was as if that he was going to die on the battlefield, and he knew that.
In the fall of 1813, Tecumseh and the British have retreated to the Detroit River, hounded by Tecumseh's archenemy, William Henry Harrison. Harrison's goal is to recapture Fort Detroit, the site of Tecumseh's great victory with Isaac Brock. The Americans are on the offensive. On September 10th, 1813, American ships defeat British naval forces at the Battle of Lake Erie. It's a devastating loss. The British have lost control of the waterway. Settlements on the Detroit River frontier cannot be resupplied.
After the Battle of Lake Erie, from a military point of view, the Allied position on the Detroit frontier was essentially hopeless. The British leader, Proctor, proposed a retreat. Tecumseh did not support this because he saw this as the end of his dream for a native homeland.
Tecumseh protests, but Proctor begins to retreat up the Thames River on September 27th.
Now we see you drawing back like a fat animal, running off with its tail between its legs.
This was a complicated retreat over mud-soaked roads. Many of the men were sick. Over 100 of them had to be moved in wagons, etc. The weather was not favorable. The Americans were on horseback and they were able to overtake the trailing elements of the retreat.
October 5th, 1813. British forces decide their best chance is to turn and fight at Moraviantown beside the Thames River. They're exhausted, hungry, but they may be able to use the terrain to their advantage.
That area is really kind of strategically important, according to Proctor, and Tecumseh agrees. The river on one side, and on the other side is a swamp area, And so you have the swamp area kind of acting as a natural kind of environment that would slow anybody down with heavy kind of undercoverage. And there's a road that comes from the west that Harrison has to move into in order to come into the area.
The natives under Tecumseh and his second-in-command, Oshawa-na-ha, occupied the right flank of the British position. The idea was that the British would throw back the American advance with a discharge, after which the natives would charge on the American flank and rout them. Things didn't work out that way.
Harrison attacks. His men pin the natives down, firing into the bush where Tecumseh's men have taken cover. Then he launches an unconventional attack on the British regulars.
What Harrison does is something really kind of strategically and really kind of cunning at the same time.
Instead of an infantry charge, the Americans conducted an unconventional charge of mounted cavalry, which broke the British line, leaving the native flank open.
Within the first 5 minutes of this final confrontation, the British troops maybe fire maybe 2 volleys, and then that's it. And even Henry Proctor retreats. Some warriors begin to desert. And so Tecumseh is really kind of disgusted 2 ways, with his own warriors, and even though the many are staying with them, but also with Henry Proctor, and he sees Henry Proctor riding off on horseback.
Tecumseh stays to fight. But the brilliant Shawnee leader is killed, and the dream of a unified Native nation dies with him.
Tecumseh is the Indian presence, and the warriors' effort, all their hopes, depends on Tecumseh, and now he's fallen. The war right there, and the War of 1812 for the Native nations and Tecumseh ends on the battlefield at the battles of Moraviantown.
First Nations warriors continue to fight with the British until the end of the war. But soon after the defeat at Moraviantown, 62 Native leaders sign an armistice with William Henry Harrison at Fort Detroit. Harrison goes on to become President of the United States. The lands of the Old Northwest remain in American control.
In folklore, Tecumseh stands out as a once and never king of the Indians. He stood for something that was important, but it was not to be.
This was a defining moment in world history of this planet, that what we are today as Canadian people, as Americans, as British, as people of the First Nations, all of that is defined by this one moment called the War of 1812.
Tecumseh never achieves his goal, but his legacy remains. Today, he is known as one of the greatest Native leaders of all time.
We love warriors. We love warriors because of their virtues, of what they're willing to do, and what they have done. And usually warriors die on the battlefield.
We will join with all the tribes, and we will rise as one man. Our lives are in the hands of the Great Spirit. We are determined to defend our lands, and if it is His will, we wish to leave our bones upon them.